Hello everyone. So today in this video we are going to see how to set up Traefik reverse proxy on a virtual server or a dedicated server. It handles all the incoming connections to a central place. For example, if Traefik is deployed on a central VM, then it will handle all the connections coming from the outside world, which means internet basically, forward it to the specific applications. So Traefik reverse proxy can be used as a kind of a router. So it will handle the requests first from the internet side, and it will point the request to the specific servers which are assigned in the Traefik configuration. So in this way, the load can be distributed or it can be balanced as a failover. Some other use cases for Traefik would be to provide authentication gateways such as Authelia or Authentic. So it would provide a security to the unsecured services which are running on the network. And second, most of all, we can also add multi-factor authentications and single sign-on also using these services. Also, we can set up things like CrowdSec or fail to ban. So it would prevent brute force authentication on our services. So it would make the services safer, and this can be deployed on a general level. So you don't need to configure everything for each of the services. So now we come on to the requirements of Traefik. So for running Traefik reverse proxy, we would require some things. First of all, we would require a server which can handle the requests coming from the outside world. Next, you need Docker and Docker-Compose installed on that machine, as we would be using Docker and Docker-Compose along with it for configuration of Traefik. So we would require both of them. Next, you would need a DNS server, like it could be either your router which is provided by your ISP, or it could be a dedicated router also such as OpenWRT or any firewall, or it could be a Pi-hole or AdGuard also. So we would be using DNS server along with static IP leases. So we need both of them for configuration to be effective, as we would be setting the IP address to a specific host name, and that DNS server would be resolving those host names for us. Next, we would need a domain name which would be owned by us, as we would be generating SSL certificates for that particular domain. So we need to own that domain to generate valid SSL certificates. Also, that domain should be pointing to Cloudflare name servers for this particular configuration. So in Traefik, there are four main things to consider. First of all, there are entry points. So Traefik is open on the entry points whichever are specified. For example, if we specify port 80 and 443, then these two ports would be open for receiving traffic. Then after the request passes on to the routers of the internal Traefik router, then it will handle the request. And middlewares are kind of like configurations. So for example, we can add authentication like BasicAuth, or we can add HTTPS redirection. So these are kind of configurations. So router here will help us to add these conditions to the request. Then the request would be forwarded to services. So after it is forwarded to the services, there could be like multiple servers also handling the load. So there would be server 1 and server 2. So in services there could be multiple servers, for example one server, and this would be the second server. So they could be load balancing, or could be set up as failover, or there could be only single instance also. So in this way the service is protected. So let's see in Docker-Compose. So there are three ways to set up Traefik in Docker. So first is the CLI. So you must have seen in different internet tutorials that some would be using CLI commands to issue instructions to the Traefik instance. Secondly, you can use Docker-Compose with environment variables, but it would make it lengthy, same as with the CLI commands, so it would make it difficult to troubleshoot later on. Thirdly, we can use static and dynamic configurations. So these are provided in Traefik's documentations. So this would make it easier to manage. So these configurations are given in YAML. So we would be doing it in YAML. Also remember, in static and dynamic configurations, we are using Docker labels to map to the containers, and so it would be mapped dynamically. So we won't need the dynamic configuration much. We would be using dynamic configurations for services running on different systems or for load balancing later on to non-Docker services. But for Docker services, we would just need to add the labels in the Docker-Compose files of the used service which we want to reverse proxy through Traefik. And the static configuration will just hold the certificates for our domain which we would be going to use for the reverse proxying. Okay, so to make the changes, we are going to first create a directory named Docker. So to set up Traefik, we will first create a directory named Traefik. Then we will cd into it. Here we will create a directory named data. So as you can see, our data directory has been created. So here we will create an acme.json file. Oh, there is a typo. So as you can see, we have created acme.json file in Traefik/data directory. So this is present in the root folder. So after creating this file, we will just change the permissions of this file so that Traefik can write to it and nobody other than Traefik can access it. So we have modified the permissions of the acme.json file, which will store these certificates which would be issued by Cloudflare or any other provider. So after that, we will create a file named traefik.yml, which would be the static configuration file. Okay, so we will create traefik.yml file. So this would be our static file for Traefik. So all the static configurations would be stored in this file. In the dynamic file named config.yml, we would be storing all the servers and load balancing things. So let's go through the static configuration file first. So in this line here, we are specifying that API dashboard would be enabled. So we are enabling the dashboard. And just remember this, we will refer to this later on. Here we are specifying the entry points. So entry points are HTTP and HTTPS here. So here we are also specifying a redirection middleware. So it would follow this scheme. It would redirect it to HTTPS, and this is the name of the entry point, HTTP. Like you would have seen it named as web also. And this would be named as web secure also in some configurations. So here we are specifying insecure skip verify. So we are specifying this as there would be another HTTPS certificates if we are self-hosting. For example, if we are using Proxmox or Portainer, so it would allow those certificates to pass through the Traefik configuration. Here we are binding to the Docker socket, as you can see here, and this file would be referring to the dynamic configuration file. So we would be specifying this later on. Here we are using the certificate resolver, so we are using Cloudflare, and we would be using our DNS challenge, as you can see here. So in DNS challenge, we would provide credentials to Cloudflare to access our DNS entries. So we would be providing them in Docker-Compose file. So just keep these resolvers as it is. There is no problem in that. And that's all for the static configuration. Now going on to the Docker-Compose file, we would be doing some changes here. So let's go through it. So here we are specifying the Traefik container name, and here we are going to create a network in which all the containers would lie to proxy through Traefik. So here we are creating a network named Proxy, and here also we are specifying the network type. Here in the environment, as you can refer in the static configuration, we are specifying the DNS API token of Cloudflare for DNS. So as you can refer to this part, as you can see here, we have specified Cloudflare cert resolver and DNS challenge of Cloudflare. So we can specify API token here or API key. So best would be to specify API token, as you can restrict the usage of tokens. Here we are specifying the volume. So here is the local time bounding. Here we are bounding to Docker socket to read the container details and labels, so that we don't have to use the dynamic configuration file much. Here we are putting the static configuration file to read only. Here we are using the acme.json file to read and check the certificates. Here we are reading the dynamic configuration file, and here are the labels. So in this level, all these are general Traefik things only, so we will go through them one by one. Here we are enabling Traefik. In this one we are specifying the router. So here is the entry point. As you can see, first we are taking the entry point through HTTP. So any request will come through HTTP first. It will go through this router. Then so here in the Traefik, this HTTP router will only listen on the host name, Traefik-dashboard, whatever would be given here. So you have to change it according to your need. So here comes the middlewares. So here in the middlewares, we are putting an authentication for the dashboard to keep it secure, and we are also putting an HTTPS redirect. So we are also putting in custom SSL header, as you can see here, for HTTPS. So these are the just general Traefik things, and here we are specifying to follow the middleware. So as you can see, this name should match this name. So we are just doing an HTTPS redirect, so it would be this one. And after that, here the router has been changed to Traefik secure, because HTTP router cannot route HTTPS traffic. So we have to create another router for the HTTPS traffic. So here the entry point has been changed. Again the rule is there, so it will listen to the same URL. Here we are adding a middleware of TraefikAuth, and here we are securing it with TLS certificates. Here the Cloudflare resolver is given, and here we are specifying the domain for which the certificates have to be obtained. And here is the main domain, and here would be the wildcard domain. So we are giving it as sans. And here, as you remember, as in the first line, here is the API service. So this service is connected to the API of Traefik dashboard. So here it will connect to that. So this is all for Docker-Compose. Just save it, change this DNS API token or these credentials, and change the URL. I will tell you to generate a BasicAuth password later on, and here just create a user for the Traefik dashboard. Again change the URL here also, and change the domain name to here also. Also just change these things also. And just after that we have to create dynamic configuration also. We don't need to put anything in it for now, but we need to create it for Traefik to work. Okay, so we are going to apply these changes. So here so as you can see, the acme.json file was created in the traefik/dated folder, and the permissions have also been changed to 600 for this file. So now we will create the traefik.yml file. So here is the static configuration of the Traefik file. So here we will save it. So here we will change some things. For example, we will change the email here, and rest all is okay. So just change this email to your email. Save it. Now create a file named as config.yml, which would be the dynamic configuration file. We will just create it for now, and that is enough. So as you can see, there are 3 files created in the data folder: acme.json file, config.yml file, which is the dynamic configuration file, and traefik.yml file. So this is the static configuration file. Now in the Traefik folder, we will create Docker-Compose file. So here we will change the Cloudflare environment variable here, and we have to map the location of static configuration file of Traefik, the acme.json file, and the dynamic configuration file for Traefik to work. In the labels part and in the BasicAuth middleware, we have to change the user here, and we have to change the password here, which would be generated by a command. Here we have to change the Traefik dashboard's URL, and here also we have to change the same. And here we have to specify the domain for which certificates have to be obtained, and same for here also. And here we are specifying the service of API dashboard. So this would be the internal service of the dashboard. And here we are specifying the networks here. So this is the proxy network, and we have to create this proxy network as external is given as true. So here we will map the containers on the proxy network. Just save it. So to obtain the Cloudflare token, we will just go to Cloudflare, go to login. Here we will log in, specify the credentials. After that we will select our website. Then here it's saying get your API token. We will just click on this. So here we will create a token. We will add edit zone DNS, and here we will give the edit permission, include the specific zone if you have like multiple domains, and continue. Create a token. So here is your token. Copy it and paste it there in the Traefik configuration. So from here on we would be generating the password for Traefik dashboard. So in the Traefik dashboard we would be using a hashed password. So using Apache utilities we would be generating the same. So here we should be installing the Apache utilities first. Now just put this command and change the username to your specified and run this command. Now it will ask for the password which you want to set. So here, as you can see, it has generated the password for you. Just copy it and paste it in the Docker-Compose. Okay, so now we have to create the Docker network named as Proxy because it was specified as external. So we will create the Docker network. So now we will run the command. So our Traefik instance should be running now and we should be able to look at the dashboard. Okay, so now we will configure our router's DNS to forward the traffic to our Traefik server. So we will go to the router's dashboard. So in my case, I am using OpenWRT. I will write the Traefik dashboard's URL. And here I will enter the IP address of the Traefik web server. I will add this request and save it. Just enter the username and password here. So as you can see, here the Traefik dashboard is open and we can see everything here. So it's showing the routers and services and the middlewares. So for example, we can see here it's redirecting, and here TraefikAuth is also there. So we are using BasicAuth, everything is there. Here are the HTTP services. Here we can see the API and dashboard, and here we can see the routers. So everything is working, and here you can see it is showing TLS verified. So you can see here, and you can check the certificate also. See, it has been changed here and it has issued a valid certificate for us. So everything is working fine. So now we will add a service using Docker labels into the Traefik reverse proxy. So in this example, we will deploy Portainer, which is a container management application for Docker. So here we will create a folder named Portainer. Now we will seed into it. Now here we will create a folder named data. Now here we will create a Docker-Compose file for Portainer. So here we will add the Docker-Compose for Portainer. So here is the configuration. You can copy and paste it. So in this one, we are deploying a service named Portainer. So here we are specifying the Portainer image, this one, and here is the name of container. Just remember this is important because we are going to map it using labels. So here we are specifying the networks, same as the traffic reverse proxy. So the traffic would be handled through the proxy network. So any container on this same network would be able to access the data of each other because it is unencrypted. So just keep the applications on separate networks for security purposes. So here we are mentioning the volumes, and here we are mentioning the local time binding. Here we are mentioning the Docker socket binding for Portainer to work properly and to manage containers. And here we are specifying the data location of Portainer. And here is the most important part. Here we come to the labels. So using the help of labels, we would be connecting to the traffic reverse proxy. And here we are mentioning labels such as traffic enabled. So this would enable traffic to listen here. Here we are mentioning two routers, HTTP router, first Portainer, which would be listening on HTTP port, and another router for HTTPS port. As I already mentioned, there should be two routers, one for HTTP traffic and one for HTTPS traffic, and both have separate entry points like here. Also just recall, we have mentioned this HTTPS redirect middleware earlier also. So this is the same middleware, so we can use it as it is, as we mentioned in the traffic dashboard configuration. So it is just redirecting to HTTPS. Here we are mentioning the URL of Portainer or any other service, and here also we are doing the same thing. Here we are enabling the TLS, means the HTTPS certificate to be true, and here we are mentioning the name of the container. And in the next part, we are mentioning the port of the local service. So for example, Portainer container will run on HTTP 9000 port. So we are mentioning the same here. So it will connect to port 9000 using the Docker network proxy here. So here we have to mention the Docker network at three places: in the Docker-Compose above, in the below networks, and in the traffic label also. So now you can just save it, and now you can run Docker-Compose up. So as you can see, here it's bind to the address 9000. Now we can go to the browser and check it. Also you can run -d to run in background. So now it will run. So see, now the Portainer is running in the background. Now you can verify the same in the traffic dashboard also. Go to the routers, explore, and here you can see there is an HTTPS entry and an HTTP entry. So this is secured with a certificate. Now you have to set the DNS also in the router configuration to the specified host name of the Portainer service. Also remember, this DNS service should be pointed on which machine the Traefik service is running on. Now just try to access that host name. So here we are going to create a user. So here the Portainer is created, and here you can see the connection is HTTPS certified, and here the certificate is issued in the common name of the domain specified. So this is how traffic reverse proxy works with the help of Docker labels. So in the same way, you can configure multiple services using Docker labels, and in that you just have to change some parameters. which I will show you now. So here is the Portainer Docker-Compose file. So here is the Portainer image, and just remember this container name because we would be referring it later on in the labels of Traefik. So we are referring it here, and we are mentioning the HTTP port of Portainer. So this would be 9000 in our case. Here we are mentioning the Docker network as proxy, and just remember the network is mentioned 3 times here, and 1 time in the label and 2 times in the Docker-Compose. And also remember to separate the applications depending on the use cases from the network, because everything is unencrypted from here on until the Traefik reverse proxy. So just keep the network separate from each other for security purposes. So if you want to create another service, you just have to change these names. Just change this, all these. Just replace Portainer with your service and replace the name here also, and replace the name here also. So these two are the host names, so you would type them and it would open the respective services. Here you have to change the port of the respective application, which would be HTTP port, and here you have to change the router names and services name, and you have to make sure there are 2 routers. One is HTTP router and one is HTTPS router. Rest everything you can keep the same, and you can continue with it and deploy as many as services you like, so everything would work fine. So for example, if you are running another service for Jellyfin, so you will change it as, just take it, copy it and paste it here. So for example, in this way, these labels are for the service named as Jellyfin. So Jellyfin is a web player for like your own content. So its HTTP port is 8096. So we have changed the port, we have changed the service name, and we have changed the host name to open here and here. And we have changed the router names also, both for HTTP router and HTTPS router. And we are using a common middleware, so there is no need to change it every time. So this would apply to a service named Jellyfin. So this is referring to this container name. So you can keep any name for router, but you have to make sure the service name is correct. So don't worry, I would be uploading this on the GitHub page linked below in the description, so you can go and check it out. So now we are going to proceed to edit the dynamic configuration of Traefik. So if you want to point to another server which is different from the host machine, or we want to use something which is not running on Docker, so we can use this dynamic configuration of Traefik to point to that specific host. So for example, so here is the HTTP section and we are specifying the routers here. The router name here is Proxmox. So we are specifying the entry point as HTTPS here for the specific service. So here we are mentioning the rule. It's very similar to the Docker labels provided for Traefik, and here we are mentioning the host name for the specific service. So if we put this host name, it would point it to the specific service given below. So here we are using the middlewares of HTTPS redirects, and we are using some default headers. For the application to work correctly, just make sure this name matches with this name here. So here we are specifying the services, and this name of service is Proxmox. Here we are specifying the servers of Proxmox. So here we will put the URL of the service. So just put it, and here you don't have to change anything. This is the middleware, and these are the default headers for functioning of the application or the service. Here you can mention the IP whitelist range to prevent any strange connections. So here you can mention your source home IP ranges, and at the last, here we are using the secured rule to apply these middlewares, the default whitelist and the default headers here. So now you can just copy it and paste it in the Docker dynamic configuration file. So here we will go back to the SSH. We will go to Traefik. We will go to data directory. And we will paste all of that here. Now we will save it and exit it. Also just see here, as you can see here, we are mentioning the TLS for HTTPS certs. Rerun the Traefik again. So now it's created again. Now we have to create a DNS entry again in the router. So go ahead and do that. And now we will try to access the Proxmox. So it is working fine now, and here we can check the certificate, and it is a verified certificate. So here you can see it is opening and working fine now. So this is how you can set up Traefik reverse proxy to secure all your connections with HTTPS certificates and have a reverse proxy guarding it. So this tutorial was regarding Traefik reverse proxy and how to set up using Docker and Docker labels, and set up dynamic configuration to point it to services which are running on different machines running these services. So if you have any comments or suggestions, just comment it down below, and thanks for watching.